I'm a second-generation police officer. My dad was a police officer. I think that's probably why I went in the profession in the first place. Different era back in the 60s. Actually, when I was in high school, toward the end of high school was when the Vietnam War was still going on, and I was called to be drafted. And fortunately, I guess, in some ways, because I saw a lot of horrific things from friends that older brothers and some of them themselves that went to war, how terrible war is and how the carnage and stuff that occurs when people get into a situation where they have to kill other people. So I've always started my kind of start in life in terms of the sanctity of life is the most important of my job. I became a police officer because I wanted to help people. I think just about every applicant we get feels that way. They want to make a difference. At some point, people get jaded and they lose that kind of, what would you call it, the fairy dust that, you really want to save the world. And then reality hits and you realize there's only so much you can do. But the nicest thing about the police profession is every day our officers get a chance to make a difference and help people. And we try to remind them that it doesn't have to be the most profound incident. I mean, we just had a very traumatic incident last week where there was an active shooter and our officers went in there as protectors. They went in there, they actually tended to the wounded, got them out, got them to the fire department, through that quick action, got them to the hospital where every one of those people survived. And the trauma doctor told us, had they got there any later, we probably would have lost at least one, maybe two of those people. So our officers are willing to do that, put themselves on the line. And I think, one of the first things that you really should know about police officers is we're human beings too. And I think most officers, and not all, I know there's been bad officers, there's corrupt officers across the nation. There's corrupt officers across the nation. We've seen it here in Albuquerque, the problems that brought the Department of Justice here. We're not tolerating that anymore. We're trying to change the culture. We're trying to get people to get back to be a helping profession, because not too many people can do what we do. We're there first. We're the first ones to deal with some of the worst things that people would ever see in their life, and we're there, and we will always be there for people. That's what gives your community and all of you hope, is that if you call 911, that the police will come and be there to help you. So that's my first goal as a chief, is to make sure that our people don't forget that. Over the years, there's been a lot of, I don't want to say paramilitary, but more of a sense of that the police are warriors. The police see themselves as that they're fighting a war on crime, a war on drugs. And I think that's a bad analogy, because it kind of glumps people into this us versus them. We're not fighting a war with all of you. We're not fighting a war with most of the people. Richard, you worked in the Southeast and you worked in the International District. For all the bad people that are there, there's good people. And those are the people that are basically the people that keep that, the hope that things will change, and they, survive down there despite the bad people. And so, we do have to deal with the evil elements that are in our society, and that's unfortunate, but that's what life is about, is we have to try to impact change where we can. And I heard some great stories today about people that maybe had some problems in their life before, but congratulations, you guys have got on the right track through the help of groups like this and other services and resources in our community. That's the goal here, is for us now, is there's only so much I'll be able to do during my time here with the APD, because most of what I hope to do is impact the future. The young kids that are in families that basically they're destined for failure. They're destined because of poverty and maybe some ignorance in their family, and people in jail that don't want to change. Is those kids shouldn't be, that shouldn't be their inheritance. We should give them a chance to be the good people. And we're creating a lot of youth engagement opportunities for groups. We've done summer camps now. We want our officers to be out there and be known. I know you were telling the story about the beat cop, the guy that was there and knew everybody. Would give you a good swift kick if you were doing the wrong thing. But, it wasn't a matter of that he was doing it to be a mean. He was doing it because he cared about the people. And I think that's the message I want my officers to show, is that we do care. And I know officers sometimes tend to be very disciplined. Let me put it that way. They're very strict when they stopped you. They'll ask a question. We talked about traffic stops and things as, driver's license and registration. Well, what did I do wrong? Driver's license and registration. Anybody have something like that? we teach them now to engage, okay? Communication skills are huge. When you deal with like being a robot on these stops, nobody's going to see you as a human being. But if you introduce yourself and you know, excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, sir, the reason I stopped you is back that stoplight there, you kind of rolled through when you made the right turn on red, and somebody had to avoid you a little bit. And I just wanted to let you know for your safety. And also, it looks like you don't have your seatbelt fastened all the way. We're there to help you so that you don't get in an accident. But officers always don't come across as that helping person. So we got to make sure, I'm trying to make sure my officers, I know you have some guidelines here as far as what people do to get stopped. I'll tell you, from my own standpoint, if I'm like in a different state and a police car pulls behind me, my heart starts beating, okay? So I know what you guys are feeling is you guys really must be freaking out when that happens. And it's a human reaction. We're all human, we feel that. And that's what I want you guys to know is our officers are human. You know, they have families, they have problems. Some of us, and I'll admit it myself, I have 2 family members that one's, well, I hope he's in a recovery program for alcoholism. And I have another family member that has a drug addiction and next week has a court date that he may or may not be in jail for the next couple of years. I have, because of my ex-daughter-in-law, who we haven't seen for 3 years, my wife and I have custody of 2 grandchildren because they wouldn't have a life if it was the mother we haven't seen except who calls at Christmas occasionally from different parts of the country. I know how suffering is in families that have, you know, the needs of, when you have an addict or something in your family or you're that person, basically you hold your family hostage, and the family tries to do whatever they can to help their own children. We would do anything for our own people. But, you know, we have to understand that we've got to get people help. It's not a matter of, I can't stand when my officers sometimes tell me, they go to a neighborhood or they go to a call and they tell the people, we can't do anything. We can't do anything about it. Nobody wants to hear that. There's always something we can do. And so I've got to encourage them to treat, when they go on these calls, to treat people as if that was your family member. Would you tell your 16-year-old daughter, well, we'll take the report that your boyfriend's stalking you and that he may have assaulted you, but we can't do anything else. I can guarantee you that officer will be tracking down that person or do what he can to avoid and prevent that problem. We are family. We're part of the community. The police and the community work together. Just think what we can accomplish, and that's what we're trying to do is create partnerships. This group here is a great example because we could be the best pipeline to get people to help with your guys' help as well. In your example, the people that are in this program are the best example. I've heard a couple success stories already, not to point anybody out, but people that have got past their rough parts in their life and are moving on. And again, carrying on to that to the next generation, you guys are the best example to help us get that message across. We're working on a lot of community-based programs where the faith-based community, we have some 200 churches and that have a lot of ministries and programs like substance abuse and whatever, and they're just dying to help. They do this all the time. We're trying to engage them to help locally. I know, Richard, you said you had a church right in the community, and most people would go there because they knew you. Well, what we have is kind of generic services, okay? So we come across somebody with substance abuse. Well, here's a card, call these people downtown at this center, and when they get a chance to call you, it's almost like a real doctor's office. You wait an hour, those people aren't going to come back. But if they know the person in the church or the school, they may go and then, who knows, get a GED, get job training. Like you said, there's a lot of women on the street that's all they need is to learn how to be a good parent and avoid the substance abuse and get life skills to how to interview for a job, how to dress for a job. It's parenting skills, whatever it is that's how we're going to impact the next generation. Because the better job we do with community policing, it's our best crime fighting tool, at least as a preventive measure, because we keep the people that, when you're in a lifestyle of drinking, obviously one of the biggest problems that we see in the state of New Mexico is drunk driving. And the terrible, terrible effect of drunk driving when you have an accident that impacts a family, innocent family driving, is something that is preventable. But we got to get people to, go through programs and whatnot that work, not just a check-the-box program that says they went to court, they went through a victim advocate panel, they went through this training, and then 2 years later, not even that sometimes, they get another DWI. It's got to be sustainable. It's got to be something that will last. because otherwise we're all in danger when those people are on the street. We have people that are, and there's a lot of diversion programs going on, and I'm totally for jail diversion, is because not everybody who goes to jail is a hardcore criminal, but if you keep going to jail, what's going to happen? It becomes the college of criminality, so to speak, and you're going to learn how to be a criminal. They're not going to treat your addiction. And in some cases, like I said, is if we can prevent it at that point or get people diverted away from that, we'll prevent those people becoming the next generation of criminals. So there's a lot of good stuff that, we can do as people and that you guys can do as well. On traffic stops, we just talked, we have something called procedural justice, which is nothing more than it's how we teach our officers. And it's nothing more than the golden rule, is you treat people fair, okay, and you get them to understand that you're being fair. I didn't stop you because I didn't like the color of your car, or the fact that, you were going a little faster than the speed limit, and that just bothers me because I don't like speeders. They're doing it for a reason. And, so we're being fair, but I want officers, and this is part of that training, is to give people a voice. We don't want you not to be able to explain yourself because people need to be heard, right? And if you're told, sit down and shut up, or just, I'll deal with you when I get around to it, that's not going to make for a good dialogue between two people, and we're human beings. And we really have to learn how to talk together and interact, because we're all in this world together. And you guys, you see that, and the more we work together, the safer our community and the quality of life is. We try to be transparent when we deal with people in situations, even when we're arresting people. It's nothing personal. If somebody shoplifted from your store and I come there and arrest them, I didn't go there just to pick on you today, and I had nothing better to do. You probably called the police, and we dealt with you. And you know what? If we tell you and explain to you what's going to happen and walk you through it, I've had more success and I really feel gratified when I have somebody that's done something wrong, and they may be a little bit antsy at first and give me a hard time. But after talking to them for a while, when they're in my police car, and I explain, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get charged with shoplifting. Your bond is such and such. You're going to have to go get processed at the jail. You can call for bond. You'll be able to get out. The judge will set a court date. I explain everything to them, and then we just talk like not like we're old friends or anything, but I talk to them like if they were a human being, and I show them that last part, which is respect. And to me, there is nothing more satisfying when somebody who was ready to tear my head off a half hour before is shaking my hand as they're going to jail, because I just treated them right. And so that's the message. I got my cell phone, the deputy chief took it from me, but the biggest problem with our young officers today is they don't know how to talk to people. But they can text, right? And they can do emails, and they can do Facebook and all this, but they haven't learned how to talk face to face. And I sure don't want an officer to say, text somebody, sir, put down the gun, okay? Because that's not the way it's going to get things done. We've got to be able to talk face to face. And nothing bothers me more is when we're sitting around a table or a meeting and I see everybody on their phones, okay? You cannot be paying attention, multitasking, and really be doing what you're supposed to. So when we have training, I got a standing order. The phones go in the box at the end, because otherwise more people are on their phones doing video games or texting their wives or whatever, and they're not paying attention. So, the phones are a great convenience. I'm glad we have them. I'm sure there's many people my age. There were no cell phones years ago. The phone message you got were on a little pink slip that you got around to it whenever you got around to it. But now everybody feels obligated to be on that phone, and it's not so much a convenience when you're tied down to it all the time. So we got to get back to looking out for one another. Neighborhood associations, our partnerships with businesses, we're listening to people where their problems are. We're going out there ahead of them rather than just be reactive where we go call to call. If we can prevent, say, homeless hanging out in the back of a parking lot of a downtown store that's really harassing customers and whatever, our goal is to help the business owner first so that it doesn't impact their business or put the fear into the people that may be trying to be patrons of that business. But we also want to look at the same time as how can we help that individual? What resource can we help that homeless person other than just issuing a citation for trespassing or just kicking him out of the area where he'll go to someplace else? So again, it's a follow-up to what we're doing in calls today that's really different and significant in law enforcement. And that culture change is hard because there's a lot of officers that, have been kind of raised in the profession where that's changing the thinking, and it's a little bit different sometimes. Any kind of change in any organization is hard that way. I can tell you, as far as respect, I've seen stories, I've listened to people. There's some people saying, well, it was better in the old days. Criminals feared us. You know, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but the crime rates are better when we work with everybody else in this way. Crime rates will go down when everybody takes concern looking out for one another. There's neighbors that we go to houses. I'll give you an example. You get a call of a burglary to a house. We go to that residence, and they go, in the last couple hours I was gone, somebody broke into my house. And while we're there may be 1 or 2 police cars, so it draws a little attention. Another neighbor or two comes out, hey, what's going on? Oh, your neighbor got broke into. Did you see anything? Well, I might have. I saw a car in their driveway back then. The trunk was open, and they were putting TV sets in and everything. But I didn't bother to call because I was afraid to call the police, or I thought that that was the son's friends and they had permission. It doesn't hurt to call the police. Even if it turns out that's what it was somebody had a legitimate reason to be there. We get that all the time. Teenagers coming in late, forget their keys, and they go through a window. We get the call, burglary in progress. And here's this poor kid shaking in his boots when the police are, pointing guns at him out in front of the house. But we don't want to be viewed as that you can't call us. We should be trusted as such that there's no fear of the police in that way as well. Because again, that poor neighbor could have had a burglary prevented if someone had called and we got there in time. Neighborhood watch is great. It's not a matter of protecting your own house with a moat and an alligator and a big fence and armed guards. It's a matter of when you're not there that you know your neighbors are looking out for you. And that's the kind of unity we got to get back in this city, is that everybody's got to look out for one another. And it's hard, folks. It's hard. We have a society now, it's not where you can leave your doors open, okay, or run your car in your driveway to warm up because somebody's going to steal that car. Somebody's going to break into the house. They're going to take advantage of that. This is a violent, we just had, just Saturday night, I got the call about 1 a.m. that we had our officers were shot at. And basically a guy had an AR-15, I believe it was, fired 23 shots. He riddled our officer's car. How we had nobody killed or hurt was just, God was looking out for those young officers. And they returned fire and shot him in the shoulder, and he's in custody now. But this guy is a correction officer, okay, at a jail. He's in National Guard. He's had no history. What causes people to do that? We need to have people report things. I think that's the biggest thing, as I can say, is if people know that there's people that have a mental illness in their family, it's nothing to be ashamed of. But it would be a shame if we didn't know that and we come to a situation where we don't know that and we can't treat somebody. I saw a call one time, autistic kid, probably about 18, a big kid. He was about 6'2", maybe 250 pounds. The officers got there, kind of lights going on their cars, a lot of yelling. He had a hammer. He had just broke some things in the house. He was upset. Unbeknownst to the officers, he was autistic and that he wasn't communicative. He couldn't talk. He feared noises, lights, being yelled at, things like that. So that made the matter worse. And he was not listening to instructions and was coming at the officers with the hammer in his hand. And for all good purposes, the officers would have had reason, is if he got too close or he raised that hammer, they would have had to protect themselves. Thank God, a female officer who had dealt with him before, who knew that he was autistic, came there because she had knew the family, and she called him by his first name. She got his attention. She knew he liked, I think at the times it was the Isotopes, and so she said, look, she goes, you've been going to Isotopes games, and she got him calmed down where we were able to not only save his life, but get him that help that day that he needed. And so we need to get information. I mean, how many times do you see on the news a mass killer, a serial killer, and the neighbors will be interviewed and they'll say, well, he was a pretty nice guy, right? He drank beer with us at a barbecue, real quiet, kept to himself. But, he did strange things like at 3 in the morning, he was always digging holes in his backyard. And that's where we recovered 20 bodies or something. Is people got to report this. It's not so much that people are stool pigeons or rats or anything, but I think we were trying to get families engaged. to let us know about those families. It's not a matter we're keeping a database to harass them, but it may save people's lives. It's just like when people have medical bans and things like that. It gets us to know, and there's a lot of things where this incident with the Benny Keith, the factory, where he went in and shot 3 people, people knew that he had those issues. People knew he had those guns. We might have been able to get not only to save those people from being injured, but we might have been able to save that young man too. So I just encourage people in the community to look out for one another. It's not a matter that you can isolate yourself and not be part of the greater good to the department and to the city. And I think, again, our officers, here's the image I want them to portray. I don't want them to be that faceless car that drives down the street like in a war zone. Nobody stops and everybody's afraid to approach them. I want them to be able to get out and they can say, hey, that's Officer Jones. Hey, officer, I just saw some kids that were acting suspicious, or I know that the house up the street is dealing drugs. Or the officers can share information and say, hey, be on the lookout, there's someone breaking into sheds or garages, and here's what their car looks like. And we engage each other, and we talk to each other, and get out and play with the kids, but I want our officers to be looked at as human beings, first of all. And we're not warriors per se, although sometimes we're thrown in that unfortunate situation where we have no choice, but we're guardians. We're protectors of the community. And if we portray that image to you, you won't be afraid to call the police. You'll know that we're there to protect you and understand each other, and that it's not a matter of harassing people on traffic stops, or being that person that doesn't want to help, the officer that doesn't want to help. We're all going to work together, and between the businesses and the churches and all the other groups in the community, as well as the police working together. The mayor has a concept of one Albuquerque. We're all in this together, folks. We make this city safe, and people can complain about how bad crime is or how bad this is, traffic, and those all kinds of problems. But we have to work together to make those solutions. I only have, right now, 853, well, a little bit more that are in training, officers for a city that's, over 600,000 population. And that's less officers than it was when I started in Albuquerque 25 years ago. And the city's grown, and I think with the advent of drugs like methamphetamine, the level of violence has rose. The fact that guns are so prevalent in our community, and carelessness with guns. And by that, I don't mean just firing recklessly, but I have legitimate owners of guns that have concealed carry that we had. Keeping them in their cars or in their houses unsecured, obviously always a risk to young children. But from January till just last week, 900 guns were stolen from either auto burglaries, or they were in cars that were stolen, or in people's homes. 900 guns. Where are those guns? I guarantee they're not in the hands of legitimate people. And that's how the violence continues. So we have a lot of anti-gun violence, but again, like with that young man at the Benny Keith factory, it wasn't that he was using guns illegally before or brought any attention to the police, but he probably shouldn't have been in possession of guns. And the family can't remain quiet because now they have to suffer the loss of one of their own. So I just think that's a message I like to get to people, especially if you know people that need help like that. We're doing outreach to seniors. There's a lot of seniors that have dementia, and they go disappearing and wander off sometimes, or they live alone, and sometimes we get the calls, nobody's seen them for a few days. We want to have some of these volunteers and stuff go check on these people, to make sure they have meals, make sure that they just have someone to talk to. The police are, again, a helping profession, and so we can get that is we're dealing with every community member, and we're trying to deal with it in a way that, again, is together, this city will be someplace other people will want to come and live and make this a vibrant, safe community. With big initiatives with homeless right now, opening shelters and stuff in the winter, but that's only part of the solution is we've got to get, hopefully, these people jobs and help them get help for their whatever conditions they are. Most of it's getting transitional housing and getting them back on their feet. And once they get that and they have the confidence and they believe in themselves again, you'll see that a lot of these people will go on to make something of themselves again. They won't feel hopeless. Our officers are no different than you. I have officers that have variations of PTSD based on some of the horrific things they've seen. Child abuse. I can't even tell you the story. I couldn't even read it when I was at the Advocacy Center. I refuse to read child abuse cases anymore. Because if you have kids, it just tears you apart, what you see. And I saw 2 horrific cases where kids were killed, and it wears on you. We see more stuff in a year than most people will see in a lifetime. So I have to look out for my officers' well-being because, again, we're human. We have officers that have drinking problems. We have officers that have family problems. We have officers that, again, have some degree of emotional health issues. And stress is a big part of our job. The stress of, dealing what we do with every day. So again, is I have to take care of my people like if they were my family so that they can take care of you folks as well. And I think that's kind of the underlying principle is we're in this together. And I keep repeating that, but we are. I need every one of you. You increase the size of my police force by what you can do for me out there and helping me, recognize problems or solve problems. That we work with you. We're not coming in to tell you this is the best way to protect your home, and we'll tell you how to do locks and things like that for security checks, but we also want to be there to tell you, now we have great avenues like social media where we can, communicate things much faster than going door to door and say, hey, be on the lookout for this blue car that's accosting young children near the school. And we'll get people not only to look and see that car, but with their cell phones, take a picture of the car, get the license plate, a picture of the driver, and we'll have the best description for court on those kind of cases. We have a lot, I know in the International District, there's a lot of shots fired, if you guys live down there. It's not uncommon to have shots fired. What's uncommon is for people to call anymore. Less than 20%, and in there it's even less. Less than 20% of the people even bother to call the police when there's gunshots. That's not very good. We have opportunities now to get to that scene quicker if people will call and maybe recover at least the casings that we can put in a database that will trace it to some other crime, and we can get those people off the street just by that call. And there's some neighborhoods will call the police right away on something like that. But if it's that bad as we're not in Beirut or some area where gunshots should be a common occurrence. If people hear gunshots, don't think your neighbor's going to call. Don't think somebody else's call. Don't think you're going to bother us if you call, because somebody's going to get hurt. Maybe not that night, but somewhere down the future, that person that had that gun that maybe was just practicing with it will get into a bad drug deal and shoot somebody over a $20 marijuana deal. So again, that engagement of everybody together, the community engagement is huge. We need you folks. We need you folks. I can tell you, as when we drive an emergency vehicle, when I try to get to a call fast, and I don't go too many calls these days, I can tell people don't know what to do. Sometimes people have their car radios on, earbuds, they're distracted because the kid's in the car, and all of a sudden, we're blowing sirens and we're behind you. You got to remember the law says you have to slow down and pull to the right and stop. And very few people will do that. They'll pull to the left, they'll stop in the middle of the street. It really causes more problems if you don't pull to the right. And the opportunity is to get out of the way safely. You don't want to just jerk your wheel and cut off somebody else and get into an accident. But it's important because that's the protocol that we're going to expect. If we are pulling you over, the important thing too is to pull over in a safe place. Because the officer is going to be looking for a couple different things. Is if you pull over in a dark alley, he's going to tell you to go further and go to some place where it's lit, because again, he's going to be worried about his safety. So generally, he also doesn't want to be standing out in the far shoulder of an expressway where he has to actually get very near to traffic going 60, 70 miles an hour. So we may direct you off on a ramp or off to the side. So, kind of follow the guide of the officer. Sometimes the best point is to crack your window a little bit, because the officer may give you instructions on a public address system to pull over to the right or pull over in the target lot and then wait. So what's going to happen next is he's going to walk up to the car. It may take a couple minutes because he probably will run the license plate. You want to make sure now with the advanced technology we have is we'll know in seconds whether that plate is stolen, whether it checks to your car. They may find out if there's warrants on the registered owner. We may find out there's lookouts on the car. We may find out that it's a stolen, we don't know it, but it may be a plate that was stolen that's on a stolen car. But the plate checks the legitimate car, which a lot of criminals do these days. So the officer's going to be a little cautious and walk up. In some cases, if you have multiple people in your car, don't be surprised if the officer doesn't walk up to the passenger side for safety, because it gives him a little bit of an advantage to be able to see who's in the car at the same time while he's talking to people. When you ask for your driver's license and registration, I know, I think I saw it in this, maybe this, but we don't expect people to automatically be putting their hands on the windshield. I mean, we see that in some areas where they just expect it, but I mean, holding the steering wheel tight, it's nice just to probably know your hands. If your hands are like reaching under the seat, even if it's to find your wallet, it's going to create a little bit of suspicion and maybe a fear, because the officers do want to go home at the end of the day, and we know that officers are killed on traffic stops. So they're going to be a little cautious, and they may seem a little standoffish at first until they get the sense of who they're dealing in the car. Because contrary to popular belief, we don't know who you are when we're stopping. We're just stopping a car that committed a violation. We may see a head or a hat in the car. We may see multiple occupants, but we have no idea who's in that car. And so we have to be cautious. But once we get past that point, then we should engage in that conversation. It should be, sir or ma'am, I'm Officer such and such, I'm stopping you for this. May I see your driver's license registration? The first question you'll ask is, well, what did I do wrong? They may or may not get in a lot of detail, but to say, I'm stopping you for a traffic violation, it appeared that you went through the stop sign a few blocks back. Don't argue at that point, just hear the officer out. A lot of times we do stuff unconsciously, we don't know that we did it. You're paying attention to a lot of things. I've rolled through stop signs. Sometimes you're going a little faster than normal. You're in a hurry, you're not paying attention to the speed limit. Officers know that people do that, okay? We have some very interesting excuses sometimes in defense of why they're driving like that, but they make for funny stories sometimes. It's not always a good excuse, and so you want to be honest and straightforward. If you're driving and you make a mistake, let the officer know. I wasn't aware I was doing that. I didn't think I was speeding, but I understand that you have radar and you showed it, and I apologize. I will guarantee you more officers will issue warnings, because that has more of an effect on somebody that they know is a good driver than to treat everybody the same and issue tickets to everybody. I don't know if you've ever had tickets in your life, okay, a couple, but at this point, if I stopped you, I probably could just say, sir, look, you were going 10 over the limit. It's dangerous at night driving on this street. We have a lot of accidents. I would probably walk, after we have a little conversation, we'd walk away going, you would say, hey, you know what, the officer's really looking out for me, and I could trust that you really have learned a lesson. Rather than make you go to court and go through all that problem and pay a fine, the next time you get stopped, you're going to be mad at that next officer. Even if you were wrong, that's not the image we want. We want officers to be able to understand people for what happens. I mean, sometimes they're talking here about turning your interior lights on. That's always a good move, and again, don't make fast moves. People go, I'll kind of demonstrate this. I need your driver's license registration and insurance. Where's insurance mostly? You guys keep it in your glove box, okay? If you go like this real quick, sometimes people don't even realize they have a loaded gun in the glove box. I guarantee you things are going to change real quick for the next few minutes if that happens. But don't put yourself in that situation. If you have a gun in the car and it's legitimate to carry a gun in New Mexico, as long as it's not stolen or used in a crime, just let the officer know, okay? There's a lot of people with concealed carry that, for whatever reason, it's nice to know there's a gun in the car. It doesn't mean that we're on high alert and we're going to drag you out of the car and put you on the ground, but at least it gives us an idea for we can tell you, just leave it where it is. If they need to check it, they'll ask for it. There's times when we'll ask you to step out of the car. It's very rarely that we'll do that. It's usually have to have some kind of articulable circumstances where we can explain why that. And sometimes it's just no more than for our safety. If there's multiple occupants and I'm concentrating on the driver alone, I have no idea what 3 other people in the back seat are doing, and they may be passing a gun or whatever. So sometimes we'll just bring the driver to the back and explain what's going on. Sometimes just to show them, sir, your taillight's broken. Let me show you your rear license plate light is not working. We'll show them that. So it's not a matter of we're looking for things. We can ask people for consent if we have some suspicion. We can ask people, can we look in your car? If you say no, we can't do it. We can't look in your car, and we can't force that issue. So you have those rights, and the officer should respect that. We have sometimes where we can possibly take you out of the car and search the car. But that's an exigent circumstance. It could be related to a call where a gun was just used in a drive-by shooting. We're going to get you out of the car and we're going to look for that gun because it's an emergency. It's an exigent circumstances. We don't want somebody driving around a gun until we know what's going on. But for the most part, you don't even have to, other than routine questions, you don't even have to answer questions. So these are constitutional privileges that, if you look at our reform efforts, is we're getting people back to constitutional policing. We never did this before until the Department of Justice pointed out that these are really civil rights violations. So I'm trying to get the officers to understand that, because all it takes is one bad officer and all our officers look bad. So we got to change the culture of what they do. You have a right, for example, to use your cell phone as camera. The officers can't tell you, stop taping me. I'm going to guarantee probably every contact we have, we tape off people, because there's people that will come back and say, oh, the officer said this, or the officer threatened me, or whatever. And as much as the officers don't like cameras sometimes, because it's an inconvenience, it works to their advantage, because it'll refute these complaints, and we won't, have to go through long investigations when it shows right here the officer was being very polite. If you do have a problem where, it says here about, legal grounds, search the vehicle. I think we just talked about that. But, you might want to, if there's an issue with one of my officers, write down as much as you can, maybe the car number. You can ask our officers for his badge number and his name. They should provide it by our policy. And you can always question it. We have a Citizens Police Oversight Authority that will take a complaint. I'm hoping the officers aren't generating. They've actually gone down quite a bit in the last year. But you have a right to refute that. If I have a bad officer out there or makes a mistake, I'd like to know it from citizens so that I can address it, rather than have a pattern of misconduct going across and the reputation of our department is at stake. So, we want to be that kind of department, is where you trust us. And it's really hard sometimes because, like I said, you deal with people, and my officers are human beings, and so some of them are very stubborn in their ways. And just today I was reviewing disciplinary cases, and it's hard for me to do that, but sometimes I have to give some pretty hard discipline to officers that have made some serious mistakes. And I don't mean mistakes of the head, but where they just, they weren't paying attention or did something probably that wasn't in their best interest. But when it's a mistake of the heart, they're doing something deliberate. They're gonna learn that message the hard way, up to and including where some of them lose their jobs because of misconduct. So we're kind of setting that message is we're not tolerating that anymore. And so if you do come across an officer and that has that, don't hesitate to think. And I wouldn't make it real public to the officers, I'm going to complain on you, because he'll probably take a defensive stance right away. But for the most part, I want to know that so I can prevent that. I've sat down with young officers and told them that this isn't the right thing to do, and that you're going to get a clean slate when you go out the door. And I usually don't hear it ever again. But if I don't hear it from folks and I don't address it, he might be doing this on every traffic stop. So again, I want to work with the community too, to make sure my officers are the most professional, courteous, and caring police department in the United States. Now, I think Ann was talking about departments across the United States. If you guys have been from different parts of the country, somebody said Chicago, is that you? Okay, back in the day in Chicago, if you got stopped on the freeway when the Chicago police, I don't know how long you lived there, but it was standard practice that you got stopped by Chicago police on the freeway, you gave your license and you had a $20 bill, a paper clip to it. The officer would go back to his car, give you your license back and say, everything checks out, sir, you can leave. Because they were corrupt. And so we don't have that kind of corruption here in New Mexico, but Chicago police, Cook County, there was a lot of corruption. And so I can't speak for every department, but there are organizations like the International Association of Chiefs of Police, a lot of other professional organizations that are setting best practices and model policies that are uniform across the United States. So that really, if you go, really you should understand the laws of each state. They're pretty much uniform in a lot of ways, but you should understand what to do in most situations. Other than some very rural departments or some departments that are in certain areas of high crime areas, different parts of major cities, you're going to see police officers pretty much following these kind of same guidelines and principles. Some are under consent decrees. We're under a court agreement right now to help change that practices of our mistakes in the past, and we acknowledge those. But we're moving forward. But there's still some departments, I'm sure, where you weren't treated right. I'll give you a story of New York Police, and I just met their commissioner not too long ago. They're doing a great job there. But I was in a conference, or actually I was in a training leadership academy with the FBI National Academy. We were on a tour of New York Police Department on one of the weekends, and we were looking for one of this particular church that was near the site of 911. And this officer was on the corner, and there were like 3 or 4 police chiefs or ranking officers in our group. And we asked this officer, "Do you know where this church is?" And the officer did this. He just pointed. And it's like, well, how friendly is that, right? I mean, can you at least talk to us? He didn't even know we're police, officers ourselves. So he probably was doing that to everybody. But would you feel real comfortable around that officer? He wasn't even friendly at all, and that really wasn't good for their image. Although, again, that's just probably just he's having a bad day. We chalk it up to that. So, I mean, I just want, like I said, I want you guys to trust our officers. I want our officers to understand that they work for you and they work with you, and I think that's going to help our, crime is one thing. Sometimes I can't control what people do behind closed doors. We get a lot of murders and stuff that are domestic violence, drug dealing, all kinds of different reasons that cause these problems. I can't be there, and I can't do preventive actions other than the intervention we do with programs like this. But for the most part, I think our officers get the word out that, we're working with people. We're not there against you. We really want to do what's right and make the city not only safer from crime, but the quality of life. And that includes poverty and education and housing and, treating people with dignity. If we can change that, just think how great a city Albuquerque will be. So I think, Ann, it'd be a good time for questions, and then I can kind of address any issues.
You can hear me, but just in case, we'll use this for something.
Okay.
Okay, we do have some questions
Okay.
here. And I think you've addressed it, but is there one thing that we could do here to help you? What would you suggest that the general public can do?
Okay, we're launching, and you'll see some of this through marketing, maybe some commercials on TV, community policing initiatives. And there's different pillars to this, but all of you have some skill sets or some life experience or whatever where you can help other people that maybe have gone through the same thing you have in your lives, or you've been a teacher. I heard teachers, nurses. There's a lot of people that need those programs. We need volunteers to be part of these programs. Just this week alone, we've got volunteers helping distribute food baskets at APS school for the needy kids, and the officers are out there with them. There's always things that the community can do to help us, because we can't do all those ourselves. But working side by side with folks that have these skill sets. Again, I talked earlier about that church in the community that has those ministries for substance abuse. If you know people that do that, or you have those kind of skill set, heck, I need people with technical skills that can help with computers sometimes and help us do programs. The more things that we have, taking the community in as volunteers, helps us, be a more efficient organization.
Another question. I think this is interesting because we were discussing it at our table about curfews. Would you discuss the situation in Albuquerque? You told us there isn't a curfew, but what would you recommend as a police chief for parents in order to keep your kids safe?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of cities that still have curfews. I know it was Mayor Chavez that got challenged on it. We used to have a curfew. We actually, if we picked them up, we used to bring them to a community center, right? And then the parents would pick them up if they were available. Depending on the age of the kids are a lot more mature now than they were back in the day. That's up to the individual parents. If you've got a responsible kid and you know that you can trust your kid and they have the car, I think that's a judgment call. I think, normally I wouldn't recommend being out in certain areas past 11 o'clock at night. But if you're at a movie at a theater and it's supervised and there's more than one, responsible kid with your child or family member, I think that's a little bit later to push the curfew. If you got a problem child, I would make sure that you make sure there's some close restrictions. I'm not saying like put GPS on their car and track them and things like that. There's a certain lack of trust that happens there. But sometimes you got to really, force it. If you just let them run wild, that's where we have problems. There's a lot of kids that have no supervision at home, and because of that, they don't fear any consequences walking in late, where I think many of us that have done that, missed curfew trying to sneak in the house, and there's dad waiting there in the dark, have learned the lesson the hard way. I think we've gotten away from that, but there are kids that I think are responsible. There's some kids that now movies are midnight movies and things like that, and things are open later and 24-hour McDonald's. If they're responsible, I say you can kind of stretch it. But there's some, if you got that kid that, and my son was like that for a while, where you have to teach them the consequences. If you're out and you're at a party where there's alcohol, even if you're not drinking, you're going to get a ticket if you're at that party. Or what's going to happen if somebody else starts a fight and then gunfire erupts and you just happen to be there. So I think teaching consequences, it may not be a curfew per se, but getting them to understand the realities of life, as teenagers don't always have the experience or the life experience as well as just common sense sometimes to not get themselves. They follow the crowd and they listen to peer pressure. So I think that's probably the best advice I can give.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more, and I know that she has to leave, but I know you won't just walk out the door either, run out the door anyway. But here's one, because we work with families and prisoners. That's what we do, and we try to help the kids stay out of prison. So I think you've addressed this, but talk about being an advocate to both returning citizens and their families, and helping people coming out of prison and jobs. Do you have any ideas about that, or just discuss that?
Yeah, in general, I mean, and I think there's plenty of programs there that help with reintegration. I think we need to do more. If you go to the Prisoner Transport Unit now, I know there's an integration center there, so when they get released from jail, they have somewhere to go to at least talk to somebody, not just thrown on the street corner. They have some help, could give them that guidance. I think the biggest thing with getting people back in is a lot of people get that institutionalization where that's the only life they know. And so they're in jail long enough, they really can't adapt. And so I think having programs available where they can, like I said, learn a skill. I think a lot of people that are kind of alienated because who wants to hire an ex-con, right? And you were the one telling me about that program. Having programs where there's business owners that will take a chance and take a risk and help those people, because otherwise they're doomed for life. And so I think having more people that are advocates in your way, maybe standing up as a reference, or guiding these people to places where they can start. And sometimes they have to start at square one. They have to get a job that's sweeping floors or something like that, because they're not going to regain, they're not going to go to be a CEO the minute they get out of jail. They have to work for it, and I think that's part of the old, just basically, the values that people have is you're going to be respected yourself more, and feel more satisfied when you earn that, rather than have things handed to you. So they're not looking for handouts, but they are looking for guidance, and I think that's the biggest thing is when you talk to these people, is they need support, whether it's from, when they sometimes have that urge to drink again, when they're trying to stay off alcohol, or the urge they're around the wrong people and drugs come back in the picture, is just be there to be that peer and have them call you or whatever the case. I think the more that we give those people support, because they're very fragile from what they've gone through, I think we'll get them back on their feet, and then they can be the next generation of advocates for the people, because they know what they've lived in, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Okay, and that's what WINGS is all about, trying to give people wings to fly for the rest of their life. But the life stands for life skills, so why do we do the mixers, the name tags, how to shake hands, whatever, imparted to families, because incarceration is a family issue, through education. Educate, bring in the best speakers that we can. So when we do have, at our table, we had some ladies that are going home from the Women's Recovery Academy and are doing really, really well. And we have others in the room too that we're all real proud of, but that's what we do. That's what we try to accomplish. Well, let's thank, please choose my fire. What did you say?
Just say one thing.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say to all you people that are going through recovery and have succeeded, you're our heroes, okay? Because you're showing it that despite, how low you can get in life, is you can get yourself back up and set an example for everybody else. And if everybody had that kind of winning spirit, it'd be a great world. So I want to thank all you guys for the lessons I learned from you people helped me be a better person. So thank you.